check. 1, 2. Why am I starting the video like this? Because I want to show my all blue outfit. Papa! How you doing? Today, let's talk about surrender. I wrote a piece this morning about surrender. What does it mean to surrender? Get your hands up, stick them up. What does it mean to surrender? Cheap Trick has a great song called Surrender. It goes like this. Mama's alright, daddy's alright, they just seem a little weird. Surrender, surrender, and don't give yourself away. Yeah. It's an awesome song. What does it mean to not give yourself away, though? How do you surrender and not give yourself away? Let's explore. To that, I'd say, which self are we talking about giving away? Because we are vast and we contain multitudes. I can't remember who said that. Blake? Somebody smart said that. We are vast and we contain multitudes. There are many of us running around up here. Surrender is one of the great words. It sounds good in poetry and in rock and roll. A punk band could sing, "Never surrender, never surrender," and that would work really well in a punk rock song. A crooner could sing, "Surrender your love, surrender your heart," and all the ladies would swoon. But what does it actually mean to surrender in spiritual terms? Its meaning on a battlefield is obvious. To lay down your guns. So if you're on a battlefield, we know what surrender means. Or if you've ever found yourself, God forbid, running from the cops, the po-po, we know what surrendering is in that context. It's easy. You give up. But what does it mean spiritually, and how does one go about it, and why? Why surrender? How do we do it? In spiritual terms, it means turning over the reins of your life and operating from a place where you acknowledge within that you aren't God. And so turning over self-will to the will of the Father, which resides in us. So on some level, ultimately, we are Him, we are that. But we're talking about the multitudes within us. The small self, the egoic self, has to realize that it is not God, to discover that it is God. Something like that. If we break evil down, the benchmark of evil's fingerprints reside in the realm of control. And not even actual control, but the illusion of control. People manipulate other people as a means to control them. Or even media's propaganda and lies are vehicles of a kind of societal control, hurting the people to do and think as they say. So evil really, when you really analyze what evil's up to, it's always up to trying to control. It's, be it from manipulative relationships, family members or other, where they're trying to control your movements. They might not think they're being evil, but in order to control others, that is sort of the hallmark of evil, really. One could say no man is truly independent, standing on the foundation of his tiny ego like the king of his own world. It's in our nature to surrender our will to something or other. I quote this a lot, but it always resonates. It might be the devil or it might be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. So in other words, if we're not surrendering to presence, God, higher consciousness, we're surrendering to something, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. It could be it media or God or even our own damaged psychologies, which invariably have risen from some external source, some mind virus we are merely the host of, calling it ourselves. So in spiritual terms, when we are asked to surrender ourselves to God or presence or the higher realm of consciousness that exists within us all, we are actually liberating ourselves, yes, It's liberation to surrender. We are liberating ourselves from other forms of surrender and that are beneath us and only serve to entrap us into lower dimensions. Boo hiss. We don't want to be in lower dimensions. We want to take it higher. And so surrendering in spiritual terms isn't really an act of giving ourselves up, but rather an act of giving up our illusions and dismantling the stranglehold of the world's logic. That would have us imagine we are doomed little insignificant creatures on a trajectory of oblivion, fear, and death. Oh no! Because really, once we surrender, we see we are eternal spiritual beings that are going to go from this plane of existence to another, into another, into another, eternally. So then we want to get ourselves in eternity shape, not just in human earth shape, although it's good to be in that kind of shape as well. Ooh! All right, so let me calm down. Control, however, is the nature of the ego. The ego loves to control. And so to surrender in spiritual terms means an act of the ego going all the way against its very nature. The ego ain't gonna surrender easily. No sirree, Bob. And doing something that it is entirely designed not to do. The ego ain't gonna do something against its nature entirely without a fight. It's gonna unfortunately put up a pretty big fight. Because it's really impossible until, of course, the ego is properly bloodied, fragmented and fractured, and practically all the way blown apart on the battlefield of life. Yes, so for us to even start considering surrendering, really, we have to go through a lot of trials and tribulations. We have to explore every scheme of our own minds, every which way that we're going to make sure we get it all together this time and do it the right way. And we have a plan, and it's our plan of action, and we got this, and let's do the heavy lifting of all the work and put in so much effort and drive and blah, 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 until all those things fall away like sand through, your hand. It's just like, what is happening? Why am I worse off than I was before? Why is nothing working out the way I intended? It takes that. And so that's why, I'll get to the sort of Sermon on the Mount aspect of this whole thing. But so until the ego is really blown apart on the battlefield of life, after all its schemes have been tried and tried some more, and after you arrive at the bottom of yourself with no more ideas on which way to turn that you haven't turned before. In short, it takes years and mountains of pain and suffering before the ego is ready to even begin to acknowledge that it may not know what it's doing or the best way to go. So yeah, surrender's on the other side of a lifetime of pain and suffering for most of us mere mortals. That's the only way we get there. Particularly enlightened beings might just sort of wake up when they haven't been completely bloodied on the battlefield of life and go, you know what, let's surrender. But I've never met a one. And so even for people that do get bloodied on the battlefield, a lot of them never let go. Unfortunately for most of us, this state isn't arrived at until deep into our earthly existence, aka it's usually something we get into once we are old as dirt. There you go. So, and for many, it's never arrived at all. So if you get there at all, consider yourself ahead of the pack. Jesus, let's bring up Jesus, said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. And he said that for this very reason. A rich man's egoic schemes are much more likely to be casting a big enough illusion for him to hide out in. So yeah, if Jesus made the connection between a camel not being able to get through getting through the eye of a needle easier, which is obviously impossible. A camel can never go through the eye of a needle. He said that's easier than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, aka surrender. Yeah, because if you're loaded, if you got the new Tesla truck, if you got all kinds of friends and girlfriends or whatever the case may be, you can go on vacations. How beat down is your ego really going to get? All your schemes and plans are kind of working out. So, and this goes into how Jesus came to all those revolutionary things he said on the Sermon of the Mount, such as blessed are the meek. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Why would the meek be blessed? Why would the poor in spirit be blessed? It's because they are ready for the heavy lifting of surrender, or more likely, or more like the heavy letting go. This is why this seemingly upside down logic works so well. And why, if you find yourself, as Bob Dylan puts it, I'm on the bottom of a world full of lies. I ain't looking for nothing in nobody's eyes. What a line. I mean, he just doesn't miss. I listened to all of Desolation Row yesterday, and it got me emotional. I mean, go listen to Desolation Row by Bob Dylan. It's the best. Anyway, this is a different song, I think, from Time Out of Mind. I've been on the bottom of a world full of lies. I ain't looking for nothing in nobody's eyes. You got to get to that place. You got to be at the bottom of a world full of lies, not looking for nothing in anyone's eyes before you're really ready to surrender. Fear not. Ironically, you are on an elevated plane indeed. Because, so if you find yourself in that place, fear not. You're on an elevated plane indeed. It's way high up down there at the bottom. So if you're at the bottom of a world full of lies, if you're struggling like crazy, if everything seems useless and pointless and you're depressed or whatever, take great comfort, because it's actually a good thing if your ego schemes are just running thin, running out, not working out. Because on the other side of that is the ability to surrender, and surrender to presence, and surrender to a sort of higher level of consciousness where you are no longer clutching the control of your own life, but surrendering it to the higher presence, God within, to then take the reins of your existence. And he will do that. The caveat, though, is you can't just be on the bottom of your life, on the bottom of all your egoic schemes. I don't think egoic is even a word, but because there's always a red line under it, but it's such a great word. It has to be a word. I have foot drums. Ready? Oh, sorry. All with the feet. Anyway, that's a total aside. So where was I? Oh, so it's not just that you're at the bottom of yourself, crying in your beer. Hopefully you're not drinking a beer, but you know what I mean. Like totally laid out. You can't be there and full of resentment and full of anger and full of a victim mentality, and then also surrender. Surrender requires forgiveness. It requires total self-accountability and responsibility as well. So those two things are a great combination. One, you're at the bottom of your ego attempts at controlling your life. It's not working. That's not a bad thing. It's a hard thing. It sucks. It's painful. But it means ego death is near. And from ego death, we get born into presence-based living, presence-based foundation where there's flow and love and light, and all of life is restored in full abundance, and your purpose is sung into you from on high through God's revelation, and you're charged up every single day again, and you can't believe how lucky you are. That awaits you on the other side of a foundation of misery, if that's where you are. But in order to get there, you have to forgive and take responsibility for everything in your field of consciousness, and understand that everyone has just done the best they can. Whatever the story of betrayal you tell yourself, forgive, and then start observing your thoughts from that point and surrender. Surrender. But don't give yourself away. So what do they mean by that? But don't give yourself away. It's probably a throwaway rock and roll line, but a lot of times great wisdom can be found in throwaway rock and roll lines, but don't give yourself away. I mean, you are giving yourself away, but when you give yourself away, you actually find your true self. So maybe that's the self they're talking about, not giving away. Anyway, I hope you got something out of that as what I had on my heart this morning to write about. And so I'll put it in the description, the writing, and tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And have a beautiful day. Peace.